So today my video is going to be on sitting with anxiety in eating disorder recovery, which is what the majority of you guys voted on my poll on Instagram. So we're going to talk about how to sit with the anxiety, not respond to the eating disorder, before, during and after. It's the same kind of concept. So I want to begin with a metaphor, and that is my kind of dragon metaphor. So the metaphor is that you are trapped inside a house. Outside in the garden, there is a huge dragon that wants to eat you. And every time you step outside that door, it lunges for you. So at the moment, you're just staying inside and not doing anything because you're scared about going outside, you're scared about being eaten by the dragon, so you just stay inside and you are essentially a prisoner in your own home. So you have two options. You can either stay inside the house forever and be trapped by the fear of the dragon outside, or you can take up a sword and a shield and you can go outside and you can fight that dragon and hopefully beat it. And that's kind of what eating disorder recovery is like. You either remain trapped inside and you decide you're unable to do anything, and so you remain trapped inside forever, or at some point you have to go outside and do battle with this dragon in order to overcome it. So what I'm going to talk about is kind of how anxiety around food and other things like compulsive exercise, fear foods, any kind of behaviour linked to eating disorders, how they come about. So we'll start with the chocolate bar. So at the beginning, when your eating disorder is on its way to developing, you may decide that you want to lose weight and you start to avoid chocolate bars so that you can lose weight. After you started avoiding it, it might then become a rule. So you are not allowed the chocolate bar. The chocolate bar is now off limits. It's a black and white rule that you cannot have a chocolate bar. This kind of causes your brain to see it as something that is not okay. And then it's not just a rule anymore. It becomes uncomfortable. You feel uncomfortable if someone offers you a chocolate bar, or if you think about eating a chocolate bar, you feel uncomfortable around it. Starting to not just be a chocolate bar that you're avoiding, but something you're starting to have an emotion about. This discomfort then turns into anxiety as the brain starts to identify the chocolate bar as a threat. You're avoiding it so much that the brain is now interpreting it as a threat. Otherwise, why would you be avoiding it? It's obviously something that's dangerous. So your body or your brain now interprets this as a threat to your survival. So that then the anxiety will then turn into fear. And that's how your fear around food and around certain other habits, that's where the fear comes from. Your brain misinterpreting it as a threat because you've avoided it so much, or you feel you have made it a rule, so you become anxious when you don't do that thing. And therefore the fear develops because it's kind of like, you would avoid being in the same room as a tiger because you know that tiger could kill you. And so you feel anxiety if you were in, you'd feel fear if you were in the room with the tiger. And your brain's kind of done the same thing with the chocolate bar now. It's now seeing that as a threat because you're avoiding it so rigidly that it now thinks, well, it must be a threat to me. So the brain will continue producing that fear around it. So in another kind of metaphor, it's like you're walking through a field and you see a well-worn path. The well-worn path is your kind of neural pathway where your brain jumps to a chocolate bar, fear, and that's that pathway. It automatically jumps to feeling that or thinking certain thoughts. So the way to kind of recover is that you challenge these thoughts, you make new pathways. So every time your brain automatically jumps towards fear, or the chocolate bar is bad, or it's going to harm me, or it's going to make me fat, you challenge those thoughts and you start creating new kind of pathways in your brain. So your brain starts to not automatically jump to the same thoughts and the same emotions. And this does take a really long time. And again, going back to the pathway metaphor, it's like, if you're walking a dog, you usually most people choose to go through the well-worn path. But if somebody starts to go through the grass that is not worn, and then somebody else follows, and then you keep walking that path every single time, eventually that will become the well-worn path and the other one will grow over. And that's kind of what you're wanting to do in eating disorder recovery, is you want to rewire the brain so it doesn't automatically jump to the fear response or negative thoughts, and you create the new pathway that isn't fear, that is comfort and is safety and security, and so you'd feel that around food rather than feeling fear, and eventually the fear path gets grown over and you won't feel that anymore. But that takes a really long time. This is just a simple kind of metaphor about what you want to do and the pathway you want to go down. So that's kind of how anxiety works. Now we want to talk about how do you sit with that? It's not easy. It is a really difficult thing to do, and it's never going to be easy. I think you're always kind of waiting for an answer that will make it not be as difficult, but it's always going to be really, really hard. One way to fight anxiety is with logic, with rationality. One way to fight it is with your own goals, remembering your goals, remember why you're fighting. And whilst you're sitting there with all the anxiety, maybe after a meal, you have to really, really bear in mind why it is that you're fighting and what it is you're fighting for. And that can help kind of ground you and give you the strength to battle that anxiety rather than giving into it. You have to remember that the voice is trying to make you sick. Those thoughts, the eating disorder, it's trying to keep you sick. It's trying to make you sicker. It is trying everything it can do to prevent you from recovering. You have to remember that voice is not the voice you want to listen to. And it is very pervasive and it's very strong, especially at first. But you have to remember that is not the right voice to listen to. And it is not the one that will lead you to the life that you want to live. So one of the other things which is really difficult is that anxiety is part of moving forward. Like I said, you're always looking for answers to make the anxiety less. But unfortunately, you have to go through the anxiety in order to move forward. Anxiety is part of the journey. It's part of moving forward. Without anxiety, we don't recover really easily and quickly, and wouldn't be such a difficult thing to do. But unfortunately, the anxiety is part of it, and you have to experience the anxiety and go through it and process it and manage it, and every single day it becomes a tiny bit less, until a couple of years later you don't have any anxiety anymore, or you have pretty much no anxiety. And it takes such a long time, and that's why it's so hard, because you do have to go through the intense anxiety in order to overcome it. So the things that I found most helpful when I was experiencing really intense anxiety was distraction techniques. So I've written a list here that I'll read out to you, but there are many huge amounts of things that you can do to kind of distract your mind from the anxiety you're feeling and the thoughts that you're having, and to get you through that period of time where the anxiety is really intense. So you really want to absorb yourself in something else. So what I've got down here is watching movies or TV shows, reading, writing, painting, drawing, any kind of art medium, knitting or sewing, doing research. If you're really interested in something, just surf the internet. If it's, it could be astrology, it could be science, anything really. You know, watch cute animal videos or funny videos, play Xbox, play games on your phone, do internet quizzes, playing computer games. You could text or call friends or family or your partner. You could meet up with one of them. You could watch a documentary, play a musical instrument if you have one, do some homework, tidy your room, although with this one, obviously, only if it's not then becoming part of like exercise. Internet shopping, take photographs, do a puzzle. Puzzles I actually found really helpful with anxiety because I don't really like puzzles. I don't really enjoy doing them. But I found that I sat down and started doing one when I was really, really anxious. And then I became not anxious without even kind of realizing. I just, 20 minutes later, I thought, oh, I'm not actually that anxious anymore because I was really involved in finding where this little piece went that it took my mind off it so successfully. So one of the things that you can do is do something that invokes a different emotion in you. So if you're feeling anxiety, you can kind of force yourself to feel different emotions. It's like when you smile, even if you're forcing a smile or forcing a laugh, it actually still releases the same chemicals. So it's kind of like if you do something that makes you feel a different emotion, it can really, really help. So watching a comedy when you're feeling really anxious can be something that is helpful. There is the ice diving technique, but this is not for anybody with heart conditions or on beta blockers, and it should be checked with a doctor first. But the technique is that you basically fill a bowl with cold water with maybe ice cubes in and basically submerge your face in it, and it can lower blood pressure, which can really help bring down your anxiety. But that is something that has to be checked out first with a medical professional to make sure that you're safe to do that. Another one, which seems kind of silly at first, but is unclenching all your muscles. So you will be really, really tense when you're really, really anxious, and it's about unclenching your muscles. So really think about loosening up your shoulders and tensing your back, unclenching your hands and face muscles, and just really thinking about all the things that tensed up and loosen them up, because the more you are tensed up, the more your body is experiencing threat and it thinks that there is a threat nearby, so you become more anxious in your thoughts as well. So yeah, that is the end of this video. I know for some it might feel frustrating because there isn't a simple answer to sitting with anxiety. It is about sitting with it and not responding to the voice and having to experience anxiety anyway. I can't give you anything that's going to really lessen it. It's about moving through it and finding ways through it. The distraction techniques can lessen it slightly. Obviously, you're still going to feel that anxiety, but it just might take your mind off it and mean that you can move through the really intense period to come out the other side where you're not as tempted to act on the voices and the thoughts in your head. But yeah, it might feel frustrating, as I said, because there is no magic answer to not going through the anxiety, and that is one of the most difficult parts of recovery, is all the anxiety that comes with it. But I have to say that it is worth it, and however difficult it feels, it does end, and it is more worth it than anything in the world, really. So yeah, I hope that does help in some way, although it might be a bit frustrating, that it has given you some ideas of ways to sit through anxiety and manage it, and hopefully move through it. So yeah, good luck to everybody. I really hope that you guys are able to do this, but also don't beat yourself up if sometimes you aren't able to sit with the anxiety. Don't use that as another way to punish yourself. Of course, push yourself as hard as you can to sit through anxiety, because that is the path to recovery, but don't you know, give up if it doesn't always work, because you need to just keep trying and trying again. And that is what recovery is. Recovery is not a linear path. So yeah, I hope this video has been helpful in some way.